realize I'm going to have to do a little warning.
We are all going to die.
And there's no way of getting out of it.
But take a step back. As they say, use your time wisely.
Now, I'm not going to divulge too much into this. When it comes down to it,
The key is living in the moment.
So I realize I'm going to have to do a little warning. Because my topic is gender, I'm going to be talking about some heavy stuff, some heavy words. So if you don't like the words penis and vagina, you should, I don't know, just do whatever. So let's talk about gender. And the best way to really start with a gender speech is to go all the way back to the history of mankind. Joel knows what I'm talking about. Now that saying wasn't originally meant to be a sexist statement. Actually, once upon a time, we were all called a man, because a man was short for human. So you were called a man, he was called a man, she was called a man. This was a completely gender-neutral term. However, right before the 19th century, the word woman came to be, which originated from with man, which was short for wife of man, or servant of man, kind of meaning servant of human. I believe this is where we started defining our gender. And just from the small play of words and trick of names, we started using this as separation, dividing humanity up into two separate groups, each group with their own certain ideals, identities, roles, with one dictating the other. Gender. We were given two roles, and here they are. We got a man who is strong, powerful, in charge, always looking for a fight, and is never really in any need of assistance. And then we got our ladies, the more docile humans. They're naturally good at cleaning and cooking, while being beautiful creatures. They're a little bit over-emotional and can open a pickle jar for their lives. So these were the two roles we were given. However, what I just named out were characteristics, and not natural personality that comes along with genitals. Actually, these characteristics and personalities is something we're learned and taught to over time, through our peers, community, religion, culture, media, and just overall society. And although the terms man and woman have changed over time and throughout culture to culture, most of it all followed the same principle that penis meant that you're a man, and vagina meant that you're a woman. And calling yourself a man or a woman meant there were certain expectations and behaviors you needed to fill out in order to prove to society that you were indeed born with your set of genitals. This is your gender role, or I like to call it your gender box. Now, I didn't come up with the box, but it's actually a trend. A large group of people from all over who also say that penis and vagina doesn't always mean man and woman anymore. The gender box is what holds us from the unlimited concept of gender that go way beyond the social contract and what our genitals say. Because the gender we've been learning about is too small for us, because it's not just two options, it's not just pink and blue. Gender is as fluid as a color spectrum, with man and woman only filling in two small colors. Gender is unlimited, and here's why. So this is going to be hard to swallow, and it was for me at first as well, so don't feel bad. But your genitals are only a very small aspect of gender. Actually, your gender lives on a spectrum made up of three very important things: gender binary, gender identity, and gender expression. The gender binary is a gender that we all grew up learning, that your genitals strictly mean if you're a man or a woman. However, the binary is only the physical and biological aspect of gender. And it's not all there is to gender, because then we have gender expression, how you express and present yourself through what you wear, your actions, and your behaviors, like femininity or masculinity. And last but most important, your gender identity, who you are in your head. It's your personality. And identity changes from person to person, and it's never quite the same. Your gender also works like this. So these three things, identity, binary, and expression, each live on their own individual spectrum. These spectrums are each independent and very flexible, so none of these have to agree with each other. This is what gender diversity is. So what about those other colors, other than pink and blue, that also live inside gender diversity? Some of them fit smack in the middle of some spectrums, while others don't even consider themselves part of some spectrums. We have genderqueer, agender, transgender, third gender, bigender, and many, many more. So, we don't have time to go through all of these, but obviously there are way more than two. And not a lot of people know about that, because we were taught otherwise. We were taught this, the binary. That your genitals strictly mean what you're attracted to, where your expression lies, and what your identity is. And that's just kind of silly. Imagine what this ring would look like today if we all grew up knowing that gender was a little bit more complicated than what the junk between our legs say. As children, we could have done whatever we wanted without anyone telling us what was and what wasn't acceptable. A child could wear a dress without being called gay. Or a child could run around shirtless without anyone saying that's way too inappropriate. You see, you just can't self-identify a child on their sex, because it's how we brought people up in the first place, through childhood. Actually, we do it the moment we're born. If you're born a male, you like blue. And if you're born a female, you like pink. And while pink means princesses, flowers, and fairies, blue means cars, trucks, and toy guns. The market really reinforces these ideas of pink means girls and blue means blue through market segmentation, which is a simple market strategy that I'm pretty sure some of you will know about. All it does is take its consumers and divides them up into various groups. One common way they divide their consumers up is into their own ideas of gender, saying that one product needs to be suitable for both a man or a woman, but it's actually just an excuse to make more versions of the same product. And making more means selling more, getting more money. Gender marketing didn't really kick into kids' toys until around the 1970s. And before that, toys weren't really labeled through sex. But don't get me wrong, I've seen kids from the moment they're born fit into gender norms when it comes to toys, because some kids will like to play with toy dolls, while others like to play with toy guns. And that's fine, because toys will be toys. They're for a child's imagination to explore. But when a toy is limited to their sex, it also limits their creativity. And it sucks to the children, I personally have seen this, who are forced to play with a different toy or act a certain way because it's said to be more acceptable and suitable for them. Where are we getting these ideas that a child needs to be more acceptable and suitable? And unfortunately, it just doesn't happen to kids. We do it to everyone. We really don't need gender to become this prescribed label given to us the moment we're born. Where are these labels coming from anyway? Media. It has a habit of portraying men and women as sex objects and figures of action and power. And of course, we all know it's just a movie, a magazine, an ad, TV show, game, book, or song. But little by little, and over time as well, we start to see these images as a representation. And they no longer can be just an image, but a standard. We are actually placed into these standards, these labels, at extremely young ages of two very misrepresented identities of human. Labels are actually pretty dangerous because if you were told you are a certain thing, and you actually believe it, you might just follow it for the rest of your life. And I really wish I was making this up, but unfortunately there are ways to make studies to back me up. Like the monster study, constructed by Dr. Weldon Johnson in 1939, whose true intention was to help kids improve their speech, but ended up discovering something much greater. Basically, he labeled two groups, stutterers and non-stutterers in an orphanage. Oops. Here we go. Stutterers and non-stutterers in an orphanage for young children. But actually, both groups were half of children with good speech and bad speech. So what do you think happened when the children were given their false labels? A lot of them ended up becoming stutterers, even when their speech was flawless before. And they continued to stutter for the rest of their lives, just from this one experimental labeling. Pretty monsters, right? This shows us that labels are capable of controlling a human's mental and physical self, only because it tells us what we can and cannot do. And what two groups are commonly labeled? Man and woman. The women are flawless and beautiful. And although it's been proven that it's impossible to achieve such perfect beauty and just overall bone structure, we still hear so many stories of children from ages 8 to 11 already starving and hating their natural looks because they're just not good enough. Society and media also teaches kids at a very young age that men don't have emotions, although this is human nature. And I've always kind of found it funny how women are seen as over-emotional, but is it just because men are labeled as unemotional? If you're a man, you are right. You need to show power, and you never, ever need help. But that sounds really stressful and kind of serious. Also a little boring. Expressing feelings is something a man learns how to do. Actually, no, just simple expression like feeling pretty or wanting to wear something colorful. You probably like the same sex if you perform outside of your gender norm, because wearing skinny jeans and scarves or an earring is just way too gay, right? Over time, men being feminine is seen as a joke. If they express anything labeled as too girly, they are considered weak. But what does it teach kids about girls, about women? How does it teach anyone to respect women? Media really contributes to this. But the trend doesn't. That gender box trend, the large group of people from all over who also say that man and woman aren't the only two identities out there. I actually learned from these guys that gender is a choice, that gender is important, and that gender is endless. This is a movement, and it's not all happening now. All over history we have people exploring their gender identity and breaking outside the gender norms. One of my favorite groups today happened to be a bunch of heterosexual or straight males, some of them with wives and children, who openly and publicly dress in skirts and dresses and makeup, and they don't call this cross-dressing, but fashion freedom. That wearing what you want is your own choice, and it has nothing to do with your prescribed sex or gender unless you wanted to. I even found a real-life place where children are free to express their gender identity, away from the judgment and society's monitor. It's a protected area. Lindsay Morris has spent 6 years of her life photographing children from ages 5 to 12 in a gender nonconforming camp. She says, and I quote, "It is a safe haven where children are supported to experience, a place free from judgment. We are all experiencing a moment in history, a time and a place where parents are working together, learning together on how to best advocate for their children and celebrate their individuality. This is one way of being that's always existed, but only now are developing the ability to say, it's okay not to place everyone in a neat little box." And of course I couldn't agree with her more. And I really wish more places and schools are like this, a safe zone that encourages children and their peers and their parents to live outside the gender box, away and against the standards, labels, and overall teachings of gender that are just way too narrow. So Green School. We're replacing New Age thinking and trying to bring up our students to change the world by teaching them new and improved ways of education, friendship, bonds, and mostly respect for the environment. However, I couldn't think of a better place than this one to take on the idea of an environment of non-conforming gender. This is already a place that takes in a different people, and I can see them. The people who were limited from exploring before. And that's just it. We all came here to learn, but we also want to break out of those ways of thinking, out of society's ways of believing, just so we can be creative. We shouldn't be teaching our kids to grow up to be good men or women. We should just be teaching them to be good humans, and human meaning an endless gender. So here's the deal. I obviously don't know all there is to gender. Even after all the months I've been studying this topic, it would take me years to truly understand all the ins and outs. But the first step is understand that it's complicated. And just because you don't understand someone's identity doesn't mean you can't agree with it, but it does mean you have to respect it. It will be hard. The gender box has been so drilled into our culture that it's almost impossible to imagine a world without it. But I've also seen some pretty impossible things happen on these very grounds. So remember, gender is made up of the binary, identity, and expression, and not just genitals. So be willing to learn about gender, Green School, because it's not just a physical identity, but a physiological one. Oh shoot. Magical things can happen when people are given the freedom outside the norm. That's the magic. All right, so that's it. Magical things can happen when people are given the freedom outside the norm. But really, most importantly, we should be teaching a greater, much more unlimited gender that anyone can take, morph, and create for themselves. It's an identity that everyone should be proud of. I want to make a world where we don't confuse sex with gender, where it's not something assigned to us from when we're born, where we can choose whether or not to associate with it, and won't question anyone or ask anyone to prove who they are. I want to live in a world where gender is creative, it's expression, it's limitless. It's as large as a 12 primary colored rainbow. But we're not quite there yet. However, I would like this to be that one step closer to breaking the box. Thank you.